We're talking today about quadratic equations. A quadratic equation is a second degree equation. So something like x squared plus 3x plus 5. And today we're going to look at 4 different ways that we can solve quadratic equations. The first way is by factoring using the zero product property. The zero product property says if you multiply two values and you get 0 as your answer, one of those two numbers or both of them had to be 0. For instance, if you have 2x is equal to 0, doesn't x have to be 0? Like there's no other way you can get an answer of 0 unless one of the things you're multiplying is 0. So if we apply that to a scenario like x minus 1 times x plus 5 is equal to 0, one of those or both have to be 0 because there's no other way that I could get an answer of 0 when I'm multiplying. All right, so I'm going to set each of those factors equal to 0, and then of course I'm going to add 1 here and I'm going to subtract 5 here, and so those would be my two solutions. So that's how I can solve with factoring. Let's look at another one of those. All right, x squared minus 9 is a difference of squares that factors to x plus 3, x minus 3. Now, we've already had some videos on factoring. If you need a little bit of a refresher on that, you can go back and catch those. But once I have my factors, I'm going to set each of those factors equal to 0. And then I'll get x is equal to negative 3 and x is equal to positive 3. All right, look at another one of those. So we're going to start off by factoring. Then we'll set each of those factors equal to 0. And then we can just solve the resulting equation. So here we could subtract 3 from both sides and then divide by 4. And then here we could subtract 3. And those would be our two solutions. Now, there's also a program on the calculator that I will link to you that will help solve these as well. And so here's how that program works. You're going to go to Programs and go down to Quadratic. And you'll notice that A is the number in front of x squared, B is the number in front of x, and C is your constant. So looking at my problem, 4 was the number in front of x squared, so I'm going to enter 4 for A. 15 was the number in front of x, I'm going to enter 15 for B, and then my constant was 9, I'll put that in for C. And then when I do, you can see it's going to give me those same solutions that we got a second ago. All right, look at the next one. For this next one, when we look at it, it doesn't look like a quadratic because it's not a degree of 2. But remember that when we're factoring, the first thing we always do is take out our greatest common factor. So what's your greatest common factor? Well, you could take out a negative x, and then what you're left with is a quadratic. All right, so again, we're going to set each of our factors equal to 0. So if negative x is equal to 0, divide both sides by negative 1, x equals 0. And then for our quadratic over here, let's factor it, and then we'll set each of those factors equal to 0. So here we're going to subtract 2 and divide by 3, and then here we're going to subtract 1. So there's our two solutions of negative 2/3 and negative 1. All right, so that's our first method. Our second method is going to be using the square root property. All right, here's what we do with the square root property. If I'm trying to get x by itself and it's being squared, what undoes a square? Well, a square root. So I'm going to insert a square root on both sides. Now, when you insert a square root, don't forget you always have to put in a plus or minus. So the square root of x squared would be x. And the square root of 9 would be 3, so we'll get x is equal to plus or minus 3. All right, look at the next one. For this one, if I want to get x by itself, what do I need to do first? Well, I'm going to add 8 to both sides. And then to get rid of that square, I'm going to insert a square root on both sides. And again, don't forget your plus or minus. Now, square root of 8 could be simplified, so we want to put that in its lowest form of 2 square roots of 2.